find a pen and fill the paper with the message that it wants to send.
Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker. Welcome to the Aviatrix Writers Room, where we are continuing our conversation with author Lola Reid Allin about her new memoir, Highway to the Sky, An Aviator's Journey. Welcome, Lola.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, so you are publishing, it's about to launch this beautiful memoir. It's well written, it's well edited, and I want to know how you were able to produce this beautiful book. And I know a little bit about that background, but I want our listeners who might aspire to write their own memoirs to learn from you. First of all, can you tell us about your writing journey?
It was long. In retrospect, I mean, it's really pretty funny. I thought, this is a memoir. It's about me. How hard can that be, right? Easy. It's about me. I know me better than anyone else. That might be true, but it isn't about me. Memoir is not about me. It's not about the person writing it. It's about what I learned, like what I experienced, what I learned, how it affected me, and how the reader can read the book, enjoy it, and also benefit or learn from the mistakes I made or my journey through life itself. And so I wanted it to be inspiring, even though there were some downturns, but that's life. I wanted it to inspire people to believe in themselves. It's in essence a portrait of a woman, but a portrait of women and the difficulties that women face at home and in the workplace as women, especially in non-traditional roles and environments such as aviation, which is still only 5 to 6% of female pilots in commercial aviation.
Right. So that's what it's about and why you wrote it. But how did you hone your writing skills to actually write it?
Right. Well, it was hard and it was long, and it's harder than learning to fly. That's what I will say. So
I second that.
So the first, I took online courses. The first few courses I took were at the Gotham Writers, New York City. You can go to New York City and you can take courses on site, and I think that would be absolutely wonderful. But that wasn't for me. So I took a couple memoir courses, and the first few courses I took, the fellow students, first of all, having students who are also on that learning journey critique you or read your work and critique you and offer insight is really important. And while you do get individual opinions, if you get the same opinion from 2 or more people, you can be sure that they're on the right track and you're not. Yeah. And at first it was like, wait a minute, this is not a learn to fly book. This is how hard it was to learn to fly or what I experienced when I was learning to fly. This isn't how to fly the airplane. This is how it feels and what I experienced and how I can impart that to the reader. And so I enjoyed Gotham Writers tremendously. I took a few other online courses. JaneFriedman.com has some great courses. I still follow her and get her weekly e-blast with fabulous courses for everything, every kind of writing. But of course, memoir is what I'm interested in particularly, and mystery writing, which I did take also at Gotham Writers, New York City. But being a Canadian, I thought, well, it would be nice to take courses locally. I can also have the tax advantage, although that worked out very well. So I enrolled at the University of Toronto, continuing studies in the writing program, specifically memoir writing. And that was instrumental as well. I did some courses online. I did some courses live, shall we say, in class. Absolutely instrumental. You need to take courses, or at least I did, and I highly recommend it. You need that feedback. You need that reinforcement. You need the guidance of what to include and what not to include, what's going to be important, how to edit. I took a couple editing courses because that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. And is it Elmore Leonard that says, cut out all the crap that the readers are just going to skim through anyway. Right. I tried to do that to the best of my ability, but writing was far harder than learning to fly. But worth it. I'm absolutely. And now the second book is coming coming much more quickly. I already have like 38,000 words written, partly because I had a journal and I'm not just transcribing the journal and plopping it into the book, but I'll read a few pages and they'll think, okay, how is that going to go into a book that someone can actually read and enjoy? And I've had several writers groups. There is a podcast in Canada led by Bianca Moret, and it's called The Shit About Writing No One Tells You About. I think that's right. Shit No One Tells You About Writing. And she, once or twice a year, she will have people write in, pay $25 and US, and then she'll match you with a group of writers, which is great. And then, Liz, as you know, we had the Aviatrix Writers Group. So I've had two different writers groups with that. Currently, I'm with an Australian woman who is a published author and an American woman who they're both pilots. The one in America is a glider pilot, and they've both written several books. The Australian is not always specific to aviation. Right now,
Prue Mason.
Yeah, Prue Mason. So Prue is writing now about Chubby Miller, the amazing Mrs. Her version of the Amazing Mrs. Miller, and Pat Valdata, who is the glider pilot in America in Maryland, is writing about Rosie the Riveter. She's personifying Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, that's so great. I didn't know that. She's also a poet and has a beautiful collection of poetry out there. We read her glider book in the book club. That's wonderful. Yeah.
And it's great. So they, of course, did the first 6 or 7 chapters of this book, Highway to the Sky, but then it went to publication. So I said, well, I can either opt out and you guys just continue without me. That's okay if that's your decision, because my next book is going to be about, I have an excerpt. I was thinking of doing it as a short story, but a true short story. Anyway, so they loved it. They said, wow, this is amazing. Yes, lots of editing, lots of suggestions. Absolutely. That's always going to happen.
Yeah.
Learn to, listen to that. Just shrug it off your shoulders. Learn how to critique effectively and professionally, so that you're not saying this book is shit, but rather, this book is great, but you need to work on this, this, and this. And the constructive criticism is absolutely invaluable. And they're both excited to work with me, as I am them, learning about Rosie the Riveter and Chubby Miller, who was one of the women who participated in the 1929 air race dubbed the Powder Puff Derby.
Before you go on, I just want to stay on this point for anybody who doesn't know. So first of all, if you're on Facebook and you are a writer in aviation, even if you're not writing aviation right now, but if you have or intend to, we have a Facebook group called Aviatrix Writers. And that's where we actually, I think, Lola, you prompted this. At the beginning, you were like, hey, we need to have critique groups in this group. And so a couple of years ago, I think it's almost been 3 years ago now, we did our first solicitation. I led a group of basically unindoctrinated writers, people who had never been in a critique group before, for a year. And I feel like we did as much as I could offer them in a year. And I told them to go off and be free and find new critique groups, because that's also helpful, is to get fresh voices in your head. But, and we're probably due, it sounds like you have a great tight little group of writers with experience and who are published. So that's a wonderful place for you, but we're probably due to see if anybody else wants to do it. So
I'd love to.
If there's a writer out there who has never had an opportunity, or who is looking for maybe somebody in our community to have a critique group with, let me know, because I can serve as a matchmaking service and kind of solicit for that, or you can just post it in the Aviatrix Writers Room. But I do, the critique thing. So I had a Master of Fine Arts in Writing for children and young adults, where we had a very structured critique group style and a pedagogy that I learned from and that I enjoy. Others have others, but I think it's really important as a writer to find a really good a group that fits you. Everybody's got to start somewhere. I started somewhere. I had never received critique or given critique when I started. And so your writing evolution is going to evolve. And so too, I think, should your, the level of expertise that you're working with, whether it's in a free group, kind of like what we put together, or if you're paying for critique somewhere, which is also a valuable thing to do. So
Mhm.
thank you for highlighting that in your journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has been. I mean, when Pat and Prue and I send our critiques, we're I think now getting pretty good at it. So we do the critique. I usually adopt most of their suggestions, and of course there's some, not typos, but maybe some grammatical errors where we splice sentences. When we do get together once a month on Zoom, we say, thanks so much for your edits. It's really great. What's happening in your life? And then we've become good friends, which is really wonderful.
That's great. And those are the kinds of relationships that I was hoping to foster in this community. And it just makes me so joyous to hear that that's happened for you.
It was one. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It was your idea. So thank you for initiating that.
You've got so much on your plate. I would have been disappointed, but I would have understood when you've said, oh God, I can't do that. That's way too much.
Oh no, that's easy. That's easy. Matchmaking is my jam. I know how to do that. I know how to network people. So that worked out well. But before you even, so I'm assuming, but I need to know more. You're also kind of a journalist. Like you talked about writing in the first portion of our conversation, you talked about having written several things, sort of research things, and also magazine articles and those kinds of things. So where does that fit into your writing journey, the journalism?
So whenever I travel, I like to do a journal. I mean, and I don't do a journal. I got up, I had breakfast. That's so boring. But this is what how I got there and what happened, and my getting there. The journey is
like
the
a travel
experience,
log,
right? Exactly, and it's also great as it pertains to doing presentations, right? That I can go
right?
back and look at stuff and think, oh yeah, this is what happened. No, I started doing it actually when I was in Mexico, and I started doing these presentations. So I would do presentations about the Maya, the living Maya, the Maya archaeological sites, and also the undersea world. Now, I don't take underwater photographs. A friend of mine offered his photos, and I did that in conjunction with my job as the scuba dive shop manager. But the other photos were all mine. And I was then approached by a woman who was the editor at Mundo Maya, and she said, we've got all this experience, can you write for us? It was like, great. And then she said, so I did, and I wrote about my Mopan Maya friends in Belize. And then she said, well, we've got the Mexican Tourist Board or Tourism Board is now asking for a lengthy article, I don't know, 40,000 words or something or other in English for visiting dignitaries. And because English would be the lingua franca, can you write about, again, the Maya of Mesoamerica? And it wasn't published. I mean, it was published, but not published for commercial purposes. It was published for visiting dignitaries. So that was great. And then I continued to write other stories for Mundo Maya. I wrote for a Canadian magazine called Verge, Travel with Purpose, in which they talk just about general travel, but also about volunteer travel and what you could do as a traveler. So I wrote several articles like that. The joys, the perils and joys of getting lost, for example, was one of them. Just go ahead. Don't be afraid to get lost. And it kind of segues with my journey in life. Don't be afraid. Take that first step. Make sure it's a calculated risk. I mean, don't be foolish. Don't jump off a mountain without a parachute or a paraglider. But, take that first step, take that first lesson, take that first course, take that first flight. Try it. If you don't try, you've already failed or failed to achieve your objective on that day, however you want to phrase that. But you need to get out there and you need to do it. I've written, let me see where else. Oh, I've had, well, the one I mentioned, Do You Like to Sleep Alone, about my overnight. That was published in the Globe and Mail, Skies magazine. It was originally going to be published by an American magazine that folded, which was unfortunate. But they gave me a kill fee. So it was sort of odd getting paid for not publishing.
Interesting.
But it was still nice. And that in itself, by the way, was absolutely fantastic, because the editor worked with me. She said, okay, well, I really like what you've written, but we need to, tweak it a little bit. And she was the one that first suggested, and it's also while I was at the U of T, University of Toronto, but she suggested that I do a survey, an online survey with women who were currently employed. And because she actually couldn't believe, she didn't call me a liar, but she said, this can't be true. This
Right.
can't be happening today.
Right.
I said, okay, I'm with you. I totally understand why you're thinking this, but it is true. And yeah, great idea to reach out. So I did. And unfortunately, then the magazine folded. It was called The Riveter, as in Rosie the Riveter. So what else have I done?
Can I ask a question about sort of how so you mentioned that your first published article was solicited by, whoever, but so subsequent articles, when you're trying to get them published, how are you doing that? Like, how are you approaching editors, or how do you submit those?
It's like doing a pitch every time, right? I took there's a course at Gotham Writers. What is it? Hit send, get published.
Okay.
And it tells you, what kind of formats that different publications want, different types of. So a travel publication might want a certain format, a different publication, women's magazine wants a different format. One thing you need to do is do the research, find out which person you need to email, address them properly, follow all their guidelines, and you might get published.
Yeah.
They may not even respond to you, or they might respond and say, oh, we really like this. If it's topical, you need to, let's say if you're writing something about Christmas, submit it in June.
Right.
Make sure you're very early with the publication. But it depends from publication to publication. And it's a little bit, I enter photo contests as well. And it's a little bit of a crapshoot. I've won lots of jurors' choices and honorable mentions, and other times, and best in shows, and other times that same photograph that wins best of show is rejected by an equally good show or set of jurors. So it's all very individual. What's the big success story with J.K. Rowling? She submitted her book, the first Harry Potter, to a publisher who really hated it, but he thought, oh, I'm going to bring it home. I'm going to, try and wade through this on the weekend, and because he hated it. But he came into the room, he left it on the coffee table or something, and he found his little child, his 8-year-old, like 90% through the book, thinking it was the best thing ever. So it also depends on how you market your thing. Presumably she was marketing to a slightly older audience. I'm not sure. I don't know that for a fact. But look where she is now. And it's just a fluke. And she there's the stories of authors who've papered their walls with, in years gone by, with handwritten or typed papers saying, rejected, don't email me again, or sorry, don't apply again, your work is awful, sort of thing.
Right.
You paper your wall with rejection slips. Or what is the cookbook, the Julia Child cookbook? Knopf said, sure, we'll publish that, but you have to rewrite it. Right. So be prepared for, I love this, now change it.
Well, I want to get to the story of this book in a minute, about how you got it published, because I have questions about that. But before that, you mentioned earlier how hard it is to write. And you think, oh, it's a memoir, I know myself. So there's the craft itself. But I wanted to ask, you share a lot of personal details in here. And I was wondering, that holds a lot of people back. They don't want to share their private lives. Did you struggle in any way with what and how much you wanted to share? Was that hard for you to crack that open and expose it?
Incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I had 2 developmental edits from 2 equally fabulous editors, and that was the comment for both of them, that I needed much more personal information. because it was very dry. Even though it was exciting, it was dry. And we all know that sex sells. I didn't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of that, but I really did need to have more personal information. And the most common comment, not just from them, was that it was sort of two books. There was the there was the personal side, then I leave my husband, and then it's the aviation section. And it was sort of like after I left my husband, I became celibate. Obviously, that didn't happen, and that isn't true. And yeah, I still grapple with a couple things I included. It was like, did you really need to write that, Lola?
Oh, now I will give you like the feedback, having had an opportunity to read this before it comes out, that you did that very gracefully and it made you human to me. So I'm glad that you chose to include those things. If you hadn't, I also would have been like, okay, well, I can't really relate to her in that way. So no, it was helpful for you.
Thank you. And I think ultimately, I know even the first one, and I did the first developmental editor who said that, I understood what she was saying, but it was very, very difficult. I mean, it's one thing to tell your best friend, that this happened, but it's different to put it in print where lots of people are, hopefully millions will be reading it. It is difficult. And yeah, I mean, I wake up and I think, what was I thinking? But what I was thinking is I needed to share myself, to make myself real and human and honest.
Right.
And that's what I tried to do. And thank you. I'm glad. I've had very, very positive feedback. But yeah, it was incredibly difficult. It's like, and also, do they really want to read about that? I mean, wow. Okay, whatever. And then I thought about other books. One thing that was very helpful is, in addition to reading books, I listened constantly to audiobooks, and of course, specifically and particularly, I guess, memoir. But I also listen to mystery. That's very important. It's one of my favorite genres and always has been. But that's also very helpful to hear it.
This was a question that I had for you, so we'll just ask it now. Are there any memoir that you read and considered mentor texts for how you crafted your book? Do you have any favorites?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, the one you mentioned, the Erica Armstrong. I guess I've hidden most of them here, but they're behind.
Yeah, A Chick in the Cockpit, right?
Yeah, The Chick in the Cockpit.
And what about that made you, or did you find as a mentor text?
Postcards from the Sky was super helpful.
Oh, good.
By Aaron
Seidemann, yeah.
Fighting for Space. I mean, it wasn't the same in any way. That was Amy Shira Teitel, but
right,
I found
that's a dual biography, right?
Yes, exactly. And of course, I read Amelia Earhart's. Let me see what else. Oh, An Officer, Not a Gentleman.
Mandy Hickson.
I like that one, absolutely. And
yeah, she did a great job.
Absolutely. Where is it? 3-8 Charlie.
3-8 Charlie, yeah.
Which is hiding. Must be over here. Yeah, I love 3-8 Charlie. That was just a fabulous, fabulous book.
Yeah, the Jerry Mock story. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. The first woman to fly around the world, Jerry Mock, 1954. Solo, yes, to fly around the world solo. But those, I think, were my favorite. I mean, I've read all of these. And the interview you just did was for the fun of it, right? That was by Amelia Earhart. It was for the fun of it. Yeah. That was awesome too. I read that a long time ago, and then I reread it. A lot of these aren't on audiobook, which is disappointing. And of course, West with the Night. I'm sorry. I love Beryl Markham. I love the book. What I don't do that Beryl Markham did is have a little nip of scotch, just to keep me awake as I'm flying across the Atlantic. Yeah. It knocks me out. More power to her. I'd be a babbling idiot.
Yeah, I think none of us are allowed to do that anymore. So anyway, well, that's good to know. Like reading memoir and the advice about listening to it as well. I also find that I catch different things when I listen than when I read, and so in terms of craft.
Yes.
About how words are put together and how they come out, and how the brain processes them. So that's really great advice. So at what point, I know the answer to this, but how did you choose to publish? And at what point did you know that you were ready, that you were done enough?
I I'd had one developmental edit, and I thought and she did a fabulous job, and I thought I was ready. And it's very hard to get for a female to get published, and it's hard. Memoir is hard to publish. They aren't as popular. And I found She Writes Press, and Erin Seidemann had been published by She Writes Press, and I reached out to her and I asked, what her experience was, and she was very, very helpful and very positive. And then I was accepted. I had an interview with Brooke, like an hour-long Zoom interview, which was fabulous.
Brooke Warner, who I have interviewed for the Writers Room as well, because she is the brainchild behind this. Or it is her brainchild, the She Writes Press. She left traditional publishing to start this hybrid publishing company, which is, so you met with her?
I did. And she said, we like your book. We like the concept. We still think it needs a little bit of work. Mm-hmm. So the answer to your question is I obviously didn't know it was ready because it wasn't. So I had another developmental edit, and she was also fabulous. So the second one was Jodie Fedor, and that was someone that Brooke works with often. And the first one was Sarah Chauncey, who is American but living in British Columbia. And I found her just the Writers Union of Canada, I believe. And she also did an interview. So that's a great way to do it. I mean, you need the right kind of fit. Is this person, that is me, the author or the budding author, can I, the editor or the developmental editor or the publisher, can I work with this person? And that makes a big difference too. So I would look for that. If you get that far with a publisher who might be interested, having an interview was good for both of us. And now, as I'm going through in publicity, I've had several interviews. The response has been overwhelming, but a couple of them going forward are discovery interviews to decide what we're going to talk about specifically, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I like that. They don't know me. They don't really know who I am at all. I mean, they can read about it online. They can see, at this point now, they can see some of my interviews.
Right.
So they know that I probably am not going to clam up and say something stupid. Let's hope. But it does make a difference.
Right,
getting a good, it's a good fit. And Brooke was also instrumental in, and it's her brainchild, and obviously she can't look after all the authors, so she has assistants, and I got one of the more experienced assistants, which is great.
Well, so tell me, I want to dig a little bit more into that experience. So what did the timeline look like from the moment that you submitted to She Writes and now we're in September with your book launch?
Just the way things worked out. Brooke had a lot going on in her life, not the least of which was transitioning to Simon & Schuster. So it was about a year and a half, actually, by the time we talked, and then about a year and a half, and then to publication date, and going through the second developmental edit. And she asked if fall 2024 was fine, and I said yes, because I liked working. I was pretty sure I was going to like working with her and her format.
Okay, and so you went through that whole process, and now we're to publication. So what things are you doing? Like you've talked about some of the interviews that you're doing. You talked about publicity. I know. So just to back it up just a little bit, everybody can go listen to my interview with Brooke for more detailed information on what that hybrid relationship looks like, especially with her house. And just for reference, that portion, the She Writes Press, they really do cater a lot to women's memoir because they want people to have a conduit to share their stories and the traditional publishing world is much harder to break through, especially for women's memoir, if you're not famous and you don't have a
Right,
platform. So they're
right.
really great for that. And I, so far, especially based on the positive experience that you have, continue to recommend them as a potential resource. But so you pay a fee, like again, the details are in that other interview, but you pay a fee pretty much up front. And then there's a relationship to get this book to publication. They also provide the services that a traditional publisher would in regards to like submitting your book for awards, all kind of standard stuff that a traditional publisher would do, and the distribution. And then I think you can tell me how you chose to do publicity. I do believe that they have some book promotion packages in-house, or they recommend them. How are you going about book promotion, and how are you getting these gigs, all these interviews, aside from mine, because you knew this was going to happen?
Thank you.
Yeah.
She Writes Press has an author handbook, and they've got everything you need to know about, or most things you need to know about publishing. And they had a list of recommended publicists, for example. So I went through all of them. It's like some of them don't do memoir, because She Writes Press doesn't just do memoir.
Right.
They might do fiction, or they might do, how-to books, that sort of thing. Or self-help books, I guess is a better way. So I think there were about 10 that they recommended. I narrowed it down to 5. I contacted a couple other authors, Patty Bear, who did, over here, can you see that one, From Plane to Plane? And she recommended one particular publicist, Sharon Bialy of Book Savvy PR, and Karen Gershowitz also recommended Sharon, and also Alana Best. So Alana Best's book was Around the World in Black and White, with her family. She's white, he's black, and they have now a couple children. And Patty's is about her very non-traditional change from a plain person, the
Mennonites,
to becoming a military pilot, and then an air carrier pilot. And they all recommended Sharon. So the same thing. Then we have an interview. There were a couple others that, boy, it was close, but I got more recommendations from Sharon, and more people willing to say, absolutely, she was great, go with her. Anyway, so typically it's a mix of interviews. Once you pay your fee again, and it's a mix of interviews and then you, the author, write articles for various magazines. But early on, after I hired Sharon and Camille of Book Savvy, I arranged an interview myself with CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And they said, sure, as long as we take you, you can take us for a flight. It was like, okay, that works. And of course, I was really worried about that, because I don't know about you down there in Florida, but we've had some terrible weather. I mean, it's been hard just getting the plane, because there's so many people who want to go flying. So you have to rent a plane. You have to hope the weather's good.
Right.
And because it was CBC, the Oshawa Airport, or Durham Flight Center at Oshawa, Ontario Airport, bumped a couple people to do the flight. And I was thinking, oh my gosh.
I know. You're going to be persona non grata.
The weather was perfect.
Oh, good.
These are people who'd never been in a light aircraft before, 2 women, the videographer and the journalist. They've been flying before, but not in a light aircraft. The weather was stunningly beautiful, just enough clouds to make it picturesque, and the wind was about 3 knots.
Good for you.
Smooth. Oh my gosh, I couldn't have asked for a better day. So it was all meant to be. Anyway, so I sent this off to Sharon and Camille, and they said, okay, we're going to push the interviews with you. Yeah. Because
you're good at it.
Listen to a portion of it. Yeah. But that comes from being able to stand up in front of an audience, right, show my own pictures, talk about women in aviation, talk about the Maya, talk about, trekking in Nepal, crossing Baffin Island. And, you kind of get a pattern. It also comes from teaching people how to fly. Right. You have to know what to say and when to say it and how to act. When they're about to crash the airplane, for example.
Is there anything that people can look forward to that you have on your calendar that we can maybe participate in or
Well,
what?
I've got two more interviews. So I had the CBC Toronto interview, the CBC Kitchener Waterloo Kitchener Waterloo CBC interview, which was a radio article, but they've also published the transcript so you can read that. I was interviewed with Pause Books from London, England, which was very cool. That's an audio only, and that is now live as of like 11 hours ago. And also Lights, Camera, Author.
Oh,
And
fun.
that's with, Jim Juno of Richmond, Virginia. And I scrolled through, seeing who else he'd interviewed. And 3 weeks ago was Kathy Reichs, who is TV's Bones. It's like, wow, that's pretty
That's
impressive.
awesome.
I'm up there in good company. I've got a few more interviews, a lot more interviews. One with Pilot Wife, one with they're not specific to women. Some of them are men interviewing me, women interviewing me, getting ahead in a man's world, professional women's groups. On the 17th, what I'm actually doing is meeting with Pat and Prue, because nothing is actually happening that day because I didn't want to have I didn't want to arrange anything on that day in case the books didn't arrive, but you can see they're here. So that's all good. I've got lots more. So that was good. And then starting on the 19th, I'm going to camera clubs, bookstores, like small independent bookstores, large Chapters Indigo bookstores, let me see, libraries in this region, but I'm also going to be in Ottawa, Toronto, Kitchener, Kingston.
And most of these things were all done with the help of this publicist.
No. Oh, well, hold
You
on.
scheduled a lot of them,
So I did the CBC. Well, actually, the first CBC was me. The
right?
second CBC was both of us. They actually reached out to me and to Camille,
Oh, okay.
Book Savvy, and then we realized two different people. It's like, oh, cool. But they both worked together. It all worked out. It was great. And but the next two, yes, were Book Savvy, and the next few are all Book Savvy. The author readings and in-person events in Canada are mine.
Okay.
And of course, we have the Denver Women in Aviation Convention in March.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm being interviewed by someone who is in Denver. Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
So I did mention to her that we would be in town, and I mentioned you
Oh,
on
thank you.
Literary Aviatrix, and
Awesome.
that we at least tentatively have an event at Tattered Cover in Denver.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all coming together, and honestly, how did it start? So we had interviews with Sharon. Then I had interviews with Sharon and Camille, who again is my personal assistant, and she does all the legwork, sending out this stuff. And they'll write a pitch, and they'll think, okay, so we're going to do this. Like, so for example, 5 tips to get ahead in a man's world. And can I talk about that? Okay, well, here are my points. I send it back to them. They kind of tweak it. So, for example, one of the things was I said, be authentic.
Yeah.
So, and my point of being authentic was I never wanted to wear a tie. All the guys had a suit, which I wore, but it had to be custom made, unlike theirs, which they could just go down and get it off the rack at a particular store. And then they sewed the stripes on. Not mine. It had to be tailored. But I refused to wear a tie. So I had a little scarf or nothing. So I had a little scarf that looked nice. It looked a bit dressy. I mean, I still looked very dressy and very presentable. So what they said was, Lola never wanted to be a female pilot. She wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And I thought, brilliant.
Yep.
So brilliant.
Yeah.
And then I can elaborate and say that's one way I did it. And I mean, why should I wear a tie? I hate them to begin with. I'm not even fond of them on guys.
Sometimes we don't have a choice if it's the uniform. I got to tell you.
Well, that's true. But they were quite amenable, as long as I had something, kind of, it was appropriate. They said
It was
sure.
early days too. They hadn't figured out the rules yet, so you could kind of make your own.
That's exactly right.
I see. So you write these articles and then you have your byline there and the author of this book. That's great advice too about kind of how to get the word out about your upcoming book launch.
Right. What I also did was a 1-page, 8.5 by 11. I don't have a sample of it here, but a little picture of the book in the corner, a little not really a synopsis, but a quote from someone who's read the book
Yeah.
and they liked it, and where to get it, where to buy it, who the publisher is. And I sent
All
that out
stuff
to
that,
bookstores
yeah, I was going
across
to say all
Canada.
stuff that bookstores are going to want. And so like I talk like I'm a published author and I know all this stuff. Well, I'm not published yet, but I did have the pleasure of um, working on a book tour for one of our authors in our group. And
Cool.
so I got to kind of dig into and that's a thing that you can do as an author on your own. You can hire somebody to do this if you don't have the time to do it. But if you do and you like to kind of have control of your own logistics and your own calendar and want to do it yourself, you can go on bookstores websites and they will tell you what they expect and their timeline, especially the ones that are very big independent bookstores in very central locations. They've got it all kind of out there for people to understand what their rules of engagement are and what they need you to do to submit to get
Right.
on their
One
calendar.
of
Yeah.
the yeah, sorry.
No.
One of the things I did too, and not everyone was able to accommodate this, but I have a lengthy presentation that I do for International Women's Day, or anytime. I'll do it anytime, but anytime during the month of March or anytime. And it's just a brief history of women in aviation. The first licensed pilot was March 8th, 1910, Ramon de la Roche. And I have a shortened abbreviated version of that, say 15 minutes, a little bit of a preamble. So obviously we need a projector, a screen. I have the other equipment. And then I do a short couple readings and then, Q&A. So that's kind of a draw too that's been popular, or that seems to be popular at some of the locations. Others they're just not able to do that. Some libraries will bring the books in. Sometimes I will bring the books in. But honestly, I have a Google document and an Excel spreadsheet to keep all my engagements
I'm sure. Yeah.
straight. The first time that they sent out a pitch, again, 4 days later, it came back with this huge long email of all these responses. And honestly, I got an instant headache. I was so overwhelmed. I was so amazed and absolutely grateful that people were so interested in women in aviation. I was so thrilled.
That's wonderful. Well, good for you. I can't wait to see how this all unfolds. Were there any things that you learned along this journey that you wish you had known when you started or at earlier? Like, any lessons learned that you'd like to pass on to anyone who is pursuing publishing a memoir?
Basically, what you said earlier, you have to be willing to reveal something about yourself. It can't just be, this is my career as an engineer or my career as a teacher. You really have to make yourself human, which means fallible and with foibles and issues, and do it.
Yeah, and I think people struggle with this with the idea of having to make themselves that kind of vulnerable. It's a memoir, so theoretically it should be a specific period of time in your life, and you get to choose. I mean, you do get to choose what you put in there, and so how we never go into the bedroom with you, we know that you were in the bedroom, but we're not there with you. Like, you're able to, you can find a way to share these things that hopefully makes you comfortable enough. And it's very scary at first. And that's where the critique group thing, like revealing it a little bit at a time in a safe space with people who are supportive of you is really important, and having, like you said, the guidance of other readers to kind of say, oh, maybe you don't need this in here. That will help. I think if somebody, I know when I started writing, just even creatively, I was terrified about the criticism that I would get. And so now, of course, I'm a lot more accustomed to it, but it's something that you work your confidence up to, just the way you might if you are not an ace flyer the first time you get in a plane and take off.
Right.
So.
I think too, with respect to critique or anything, even at any stage, maybe initially particularly, but at any stage, if it's negative, I mean, the first thing you want to do, that you shouldn't. But the first thing you want to do is jot down send them back a nasty email or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Or whatever. Just don't do it. Just, for me, since I'm exuberant, I will read it, I'll put it away, I'll come back to it, and I'll think, oh, wait, maybe I kind of misread that. What they're really saying is X, and I thought it was Y. And maybe, even if they are saying X, they're right. Or I could phrase this better. So, for example, when I was instructing, doing ground school particularly, if there was a question, and while I'll say there are no stupid questions, I mean, there can be wasteful questions, which I found in first-year courses at university, students really keen on wasting the prof's time. But generally, in aviation, there are no stupid questions from someone who's genuinely interested. But if there's one question, there's probably 3 or 4 others in a group of 10. So like, say, 30 or 40% of people, if they'll have that same question. If one does, they'll also be confused. And it could be because I didn't explain it properly.
Right.
It could be it needs more explanation, or it needs to be elaborated on. And that's really important to realize, that most people who are taking these courses are not out to get you. They just don't understand. And it's important to just step back and then come back at it the next day or something. And it does make a big difference.
Well, this is where having multiple critique groups over the span of your sort of writing evolution is really helpful, because first of all, you would think as pilots that we would be accustomed to getting critique, because that's all that happens in the plane the entire time during your training, and you're giving critique to your co-pilot. But they're not. Those are critiques about an action that you're taking, and not about you as a human being, which is how you could feel, I think, if you were writing a memoir, or me doing creative work. It's a different kind of feeling. The way that you receive that, especially initially, is very different than somebody telling you you're off altitude or you didn't hit your landing spot.
It's not a personal, personal insult.
This is personal, and you have to, I think, build up a tolerance and an understanding in the critique environment so that you can be ready for the kind of critique that you're going to get if you're working with a professional editor.
Right.
And also though, as over time working with different critique partners, you will start to learn what to let in and maybe what to not let in, and you'll be able to make informed decisions about that. But that only, I think, can come from experience and from having many different viewpoints looking at your work. Well, Lola, this has been wonderful. I am so ecstatic for you. It has been such a joy to, kind of be your friend and your book club partner, and to watch you kind of go through this evolution and to see it come to fruition. I hope we can be having a conversation like this about me in a year.
Yay!
If I can finish my
so
stuff.
Liz, how did your journey? Tell me about your journey.
I know. I can't wait to tell everybody my journey. So, but in the meantime, I will continue hearing all of yours and celebrating your book launches. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about related to writing and publishing that we haven't hit on?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think, I'll ask you a question. You have another book in the works. It's about sort of your travels and your experiences, especially in Mexico and Belize. And you're going to write this book. Do you think that you'll go the same publishing route? Will you use a hybrid publisher, do you think?
I don't know. I'm very, very happy. I might even, I don't know. I'm thrilled with Brooke. It may not be what she's even really interested in. I don't really know. If she's amenable to the idea, I'm certainly willing to discuss it. Absolutely. I know that, An Officer, Not a Gentleman was self-published, and she did a great job, and has been and continues to be successful. Everything is changing like month to month, really, with the publishing industry. I suspect I wouldn't go with Brooke, but it's not because of Brooke. I love it. It's a great experience. I'm hoping actually to go more like with the university press, because it's more an ethnographic journey, which would be more appropriate as a textbook for someone studying the Maya and their lifeways. And so what I have as an advantage in this case is that most, if not all, of the people who've studied the Maya have been male.
Mm-hmm.
And so the culture is very gender divided.
Mm-hmm.
And for a male to interact or to hang out with a bunch of women in the kitchen would be perceived as completely inappropriate. To hang out with a wife while her husband is present, that's a different story.
Yeah. So you'll bring this new perspective. Well, I'm so excited for this book, and I can't wait to read it. Also, I have my own family ties and interests in the Maya and that region, which we'll talk about separately. But so I'm really excited about it, and I know somebody else who's going to be really excited about it. So
excellent.
Good luck deciding what to do with that, and when we probably won't do an interview specifically for that book, but when you do navigate that process, I can't wait to learn from you.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Lola. I appreciate all your insights and you not only sharing, obviously, your story and putting yourself out in the world the way that you have, but also for you sharing your insights on the writing and publishing journey.
Thank you for asking. It's been a pleasure. I always like chatting with you, Liz.
Thanks, Lola.
And here I am, I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to say